settle into the sleepy mind channel. Tonight, we will explore one of the largest building projects ever attempted in the ancient world. Long before engines, steel cranes, or electric machines, enormous stone structures slowly rose from the desert floor of ancient Egypt. Millions of heavy stone blocks were lifted, shaped and arranged with surprising precision, using simple tools, steady labor, and an understanding of balance, weight, and movement that still fascinates people today. If you enjoy calm explorations into history, science, and engineering, feel free to like and subscribe. More gentle sleep stories are posted every week, and you can also explore the playlists designed for long all-night listening and peaceful relaxation. Let us begin. Most people already know what the pyramids look like. Their sharp triangular forms have appeared in books, films, classrooms, and photographs for generations. Yet the real mystery is often not the pyramids themselves, but the process behind them. The largest pyramids were built during a period of ancient Egyptian history known as the Old Kingdom, especially between the year 2600 and the year 2500 BCE. They were constructed as royal tombs for pharaohs, the rulers of ancient Egypt, who were believed to continue existing in another form after death. Egyptians believed the pharaoh needed protection, offerings, and carefully prepared burial spaces for the journey into the afterlife. The pyramid became both a burial monument and a symbol of royal power, stability, and connection to the gods. Modern cities depend on machines powerful enough to lift steel beams high above the ground in a few minutes. Construction crews today rely on engines, hydraulic systems, and heavy equipment that can move enormous loads with ease. Ancient Egypt had none of those systems. There were no engines dragging stone across the desert, and no electric machinery lowering blocks into position with the push of a button. Instead, thousands of people worked together through repeated movement, careful planning, and patient organization over long periods of time. The pyramids were created through steady effort, repeated day after day, across many years. When people first stand near the Great Pyramid at Giza, one of the most surprising details is the scale of the stone itself. Photographs can make the structure appear smooth and distant, almost like a single object rising from the sand. In reality, the surface is formed from massive individual blocks, stacked one above another in long rows. Some stones reach the size of large household furniture, while others are much heavier still. A pyramid may appear calm and balanced from far away, but up close it becomes easier to imagine the amount of physical effort hidden inside every layer of stone. The pyramids are large stone structures built in ancient Egypt during a time when the surrounding landscape along the Nile River supported growing populations, organized labor, and expanding systems of agriculture. The yearly flooding of the Nile helped create fertile soil, allowing food to be grown in large amounts. That stable food supply helped support workers, builders, planners, and skilled laborers who could focus on projects beyond daily survival. Large construction became possible because society itself had enough organization to direct people, materials, and time toward long-term goals. In many ways, the pyramids are not only monuments of stone, but also monuments of planning, coordination, and patience. Although the pyramids appear solid and permanent, they were created one block at a time through repeated human effort. Every visible section began as separate pieces of stone that had to be located, cut, shaped, moved, and carefully placed into position. Modern people often imagine ancient construction as chaotic or primitive, yet pyramid building depended heavily on systems and routines. Workers needed schedules, supplies, transport routes, and reliable methods that could be repeated again and again without losing consistency. Even a small mistake could create larger problems higher up in the structure. The builders depended on steady accuracy over long periods, rather than sudden bursts of speed. The primary material used in many pyramids was limestone. This type of stone was widely available across Egypt and possessed qualities that made it useful for large construction projects. Limestone is not as hard as some other forms of rock, which meant workers could shape it more easily, using the tools available at the time. At the same moment, it remained strong enough to support enormous weight when stacked correctly. This balance between workability and strength made limestone especially valuable. The best material needed strength without becoming impossible to shape with simple equipment. What makes limestone especially interesting is that it began forming long before ancient Egypt itself existed. Much of the stone originated from marine sediments that slowly gathered beneath ancient seas. Tiny shells, skeletal remains, and fine particles settled layer upon layer across the sea floor over immense stretches of time. Gradually, pressure from accumulating material compressed these layers together. Water moved through the sediments, while minerals helped bind the particles into solid rock. The result was limestone, a material created through slow geological change, long before any human being would eventually carve it into blocks for construction. It can help to imagine the process like wet sand slowly hardening over an unimaginably long period of time. On a beach, soft sand shifts easily beneath a person's feet because the grains remain loose and separate. Under enough pressure and enough time, loose sediment can slowly compact into something much firmer. Nature performs this process with incredible patience. Ancient seas disappeared, layers compressed, and stone gradually formed beneath the ground. By the time pyramid builders eventually reached these deposits, the material had already completed a geological journey lasting millions of years. The properties of limestone strongly influenced how pyramid construction developed. Builders worked with the natural strengths and limitations of the stone rather than forcing the material into impossible shapes. Good construction often begins with understanding the behavior of materials. A carpenter learns how wood bends and splits. A metal worker learns how heat changes metal. In the same way, pyramid builders learned how limestone responded to cutting, shaping, and stacking. Construction methods were closely connected to the physical qualities of the stone itself. The material influenced the process from the very beginning. Limestone became one of the most important materials in pyramid construction because it possessed a rare combination of useful qualities. The stone was strong enough to support tremendous weight while remaining soft enough to shape with the tools available in ancient Egypt. This balance mattered more than many people realize. A material that is too fragile begins cracking under pressure, especially when enormous layers are stacked one above another over long periods of time. At the same moment, a material that is too hard becomes difficult to cut, smooth, and position with accuracy. Pyramid builders needed a stone that existed somewhere between those extremes. Limestone provided that balance in a way that fit both the environment and the technology of the time. One reason limestone proved so useful was its relatively workable texture. Compared with harder rock such as granite, limestone could be cut and shaped more efficiently using copper tools, pounding stones, and repeated abrasion. Workers could gradually smooth surfaces, straighten edges, and reduce uneven sections through careful, repeated effort. The work still demanded patience. Cut in stone remained physically exhausting and demanded enormous patience. Yet limestone allowed workers to produce shapes with a level of consistency that would have been much more difficult with harder materials alone. They were searching for a material that balanced strength, availability, and practicality. The importance of workable stone becomes easier to understand when imagining how many separate blocks had to fit together across the surface of a pyramid. Every uneven edge could create instability higher in the structure. A badly shaped block might tilt under pressure or create gaps that weakened alignment between layers. Workers therefore needed stone that could be gradually adjusted and refined during preparation. Limestone allowed them to make those adjustments with greater control. In many ways, the success of pyramid construction depended not only on moving heavy stone, but on shaping that stone carefully enough that each layer remained stable beneath the immense weight above it. Ancient Egyptian builders also benefited from geography itself. Large limestone deposits existed relatively close to important construction areas, especially around the region near Giza. The availability of nearby stone reduced the distance materials needed to travel before construction could begin. This mattered enormously because transport itself demanded tremendous physical effort. Moving stone across land required labor, planning, and coordination on a very large scale. A nearby resource could reduce some of that difficulty. Construction projects often depend heavily on access to materials, even in the modern world. Cities frequently develop near rivers, forests, ports, or mineral deposits because transporting resources across long distances increases cost, effort, and time. The relationship between resources and construction appears throughout human history. Ancient towns often formed near fresh water because people needed reliable access for farming and survival. Industrial cities later expanded around coal deposits, iron supplies, or major shipping routes. In a similar way, pyramid construction depended partly on the simple reality that vast quantities of usable stone already existed within reach of organized labor. The landscape itself influenced what became possible. Egypt possessed both the stone and the river systems needed to support large-scale building activity over long periods of time. Another important detail involved the internal structure of limestone itself. Although limestone appears solid from the outside, it contains tiny variations and layers formed during its long geological history. Some sections proved smoother and more uniform, while others contained weaker points or rougher textures. Builders gradually learned how different types of limestone behaved during cutting and placement. Finer limestone often became useful for smoother outer surfaces, while rougher blocks could serve inside the structure where appearance mattered less. This shows that pyramid builders did not treat every stone as identical. They selected materials according to purpose, location, and desired finish. The process shares similarities with how modern craftspeople sort materials today. A furniture maker may inspect wood grain before deciding which pieces are best suited for visible surfaces and which sections are better hidden inside the frame. A sculptor may choose smoother stone for detailed carving while reserving rougher material for structural support. Pyramid builders followed comparable practical instincts. Certain blocks were chosen for strength, while others were selected because they could produce cleaner surfaces or tighter fits. Careful selection improved both stability and appearance across the finished structure. Material selection became one of the invisible foundations beneath the entire building process. Most visitors standing near the pyramids naturally focus on size because the structures dominate the landscape so completely. Yet large construction often depends on smaller decisions repeated correctly thousands of times. Builders needed to understand where stone came from, how it behaved under pressure, and how it responded to shaping. Every choice influenced the efficiency of later stages. A poorly chosen material could increase labor, slow transport, or weaken alignment higher in the pyramid. The success of the structure began long before a single block reached the building site. Long before a stone block could become part of a pyramid, it first had to be separated from the earth itself. Large limestone quarries operated near important construction regions, especially around the areas surrounding Giza and the Nile River Valley. These quarries were not quiet or empty places. They were active landscapes filled with noise, dust, repeated movement, and steady physical labor. Workers spent long hours cutting into exposed rock formations beneath the heat of the Egyptian sun. The pyramid itself may appear calm and motionless today, yet the process behind its creation involved years of continuous activity beginning far from the finished structure. A quarry is essentially a place where useful stone is removed from the ground for construction. Modern quarries often rely on explosive charges, mechanical drills, and enormous machines capable of breaking apart solid rock very quickly. Ancient Egyptian workers used far simpler methods. They depended on hand tools, repeated strikes, and patient effort to separate limestone blocks from larger rock surfaces. The process demanded careful observation because stone does not always break in predictable ways. Natural cracks, weak layers, and hidden imperfections could affect how a section separated from the surrounding rock. Workers needed experience as much as strength. One useful way to imagine the process is to think about carefully breaking apart a large sheet of ice without shattering the entire surface around it. Too much force in the wrong place can create uncontrolled fractures spreading outward in several directions. Stone behaves in similar ways. Quarry workers needed to create separation lines that encouraged the limestone to split along manageable sections rather than collapse unpredictably. This required planning before the first cuts even began. Workers likely marked sections, measured approximate shapes, and studied the natural layers within the rock before attempting removal. Simple copper tools played an important role during this stage of pyramid construction. Copper was softer than modern steel, which meant tools gradually wore down through repeated use. Workers constantly sharpened, repaired, and replaced their equipment as stone cutting continued. Alongside copper chisels, builders also used pounding stones made from harder rock to strike surfaces repeatedly. Much of the work depended less on single powerful impacts and more on steady repetition over time. A worker might strike the same area again and again, gradually deepening grooves and weakening connection points until the block finally separated from the surrounding stone. The pace of this work was likely slow and physically exhausting. Stone cutting produces heat, vibration, and fine dust that settles across skin, clothing, and lungs. Repeated striking also transfers force back through the arms and shoulders of the worker. Even modern construction crews using power equipment can become exhausted after long periods of cutting concrete or stone. Ancient quarry workers performed similar labor without modern protective equipment or machinery to reduce physical strain. The pyramids therefore contain not only stone and geometry, but also countless hours of repeated human effort hidden within every block. Once sections of limestone began separating from the quarry walls, workers needed to shape them into more controlled forms. Freshly removed stone rarely emerges in perfect geometric shapes, ready for construction. Surfaces remain uneven and rough after separation. Corners may break unpredictably, while edges can contain jagged sections that interfere with stable stacking later on. Workers therefore spent additional time refining blocks after extraction. This stage demanded patience, because every adjustment influenced how well the stones would eventually fit together inside the growing structure. Precision did not appear suddenly through advanced machines or complicated technology. Instead, accuracy emerged through repetition, observation, and gradual correction. Workers learned from experience how to create flatter surfaces and straighter edges over time. Small improvements repeated across thousands of blocks slowly produced more reliable results. Modern people sometimes imagine ancient builders solving problems through mysterious knowledge or hidden techniques, yet much of pyramid construction depended on practical learning accumulated over generations. The workers became skilled because they performed the same demanding tasks repeatedly until methods improved through experience. The shape of each block mattered because pyramid construction depended heavily on stability between layers. A badly uneven stone could tilt slightly once weight from higher levels pressed downward. Even small irregularities could create larger alignment problems as construction continued upward. Workers therefore attempted to create blocks that matched reasonably well against neighboring surfaces. Perfect mathematical precision was not always necessary, especially inside the inner sections of the pyramid, but reliable consistency remained extremely important. The better the preparation, the more stable the later structure became. Once stone blocks had been removed from the quarry and roughly shaped, another important stage of work began. The builders needed the blocks to fit together closely enough that the growing pyramid remained stable beneath its own immense weight. From a distance, pyramid surfaces can appear almost perfectly smooth, especially when viewed beneath bright sunlight where sharp edges blend together visually. Up close, however, it becomes easier to notice the careful relationship between individual stones. Every block rested against neighboring surfaces that helped distribute pressure downward through the structure. Stability depended not on a single stone, but on thousands of separate pieces supporting one another at the same time. Workers therefore spent considerable effort preparing the surfaces of each block before placement. Uneven stone could create gaps where weight pressed awkwardly against narrow points rather than spreading evenly across wider surfaces. Over time, concentrated pressure increases the risk of shifting or cracking. Builders understood through experience that flatter surfaces improve stability. The more evenly two stones touched one another, the better the weight could travel downward through the pyramid. This principle remains important in modern engineering as well. Large buildings today still depend on stable load distribution that transfers weight safely through lower levels into the ground beneath them. A simple way to imagine this principle is to think about stacking books on an uneven table. If one block tilts at an angle, the entire stack above it becomes less stable. Small shifts near the bottom create larger movement higher up. Stone behaves in a similar way when enormous weight accumulates over many layers. Pyramid builders therefore work to reduce irregularities before blocks entered the structure. Better preparation early on reduced larger problems later. The enormous size of the pyramids often captures most of the attention, yet much of their success depended on thousands of careful adjustments almost invisible from the outside. The process of shaping stone surfaces demanded patience rather than speed. Workers likely used repeated scraping, pounding and grinding motions to reduce rough areas gradually over time. Fine corrections became especially important along surfaces intended to rest directly against neighboring blocks. Even a slightly raised section could interfere with alignment during placement. Unlike modern construction crews equipped with laser levels and powered cutting tools, ancient workers depended heavily on observation, touch, and repeated checking during preparation. Their methods may appear simple by modern standards, yet the consistency they achieved across large structures remains deeply impressive. Material handling also became a constant challenge throughout pyramid construction. Stone blocks were heavy long before they ever reached the pyramid itself. Workers needed ways to control movement without losing balance or damaging carefully prepared surfaces. A block shifting unexpectedly during transport could chip corners, crack edges, or injure nearby laborers. Handling heavy materials safely therefore required planning as much as strength. Groups of workers likely coordinated movements closely while adjusting ropes, supports, and sledges during different stages of transport and positioning. The builders also needed to think ahead about how each block would eventually connect with surrounding layers. Pyramid construction followed a gradual upward pattern where lower sections supported everything above them. A poorly prepared block near the base could influence stability much farther upward over time. Preparation, therefore, became part of a much larger sequence. Workers were not only shaping stone for the present moment, they were shaping stone for how it would behave beneath future weight once additional layers accumulated overhead. There were also practical limits to how perfect the fit between stones could become. Inner sections of the pyramid often contained rougher blocks where appearance mattered less, while more visible surfaces received greater attention and refinement. Builders therefore balanced precision against time, labor, and practicality. Not every stone required identical treatment. Some blocks needed smoother surfaces because they formed part of visible outer layers, while others mainly contributed mass and internal support hidden deep within the structure. This organized approach helped workers direct effort where it mattered most. Preparation influenced placement in another important way as well. Better shaped blocks could often settle more securely once lowered into position. Stones with flatter surfaces resisted rocking and shifting beneath pressure. This made later alignment easier during construction. A well-prepared block behaved more predictably during placement than a rough, uneven stone with unstable edges. The builders gradually created systems that improved efficiency through repeated experience. Over many years, these repeated improvements helped large groups of workers maintain reliable construction patterns across enormous projects. One of the most surprising details about pyramid construction is that the stone blocks were not all the same size. Many people imagine the pyramids as structures built from identical pieces, arranged in perfect, repeating patterns, almost like giant stone bricks produced by a single machine. In reality, the blocks varied considerably, depending on where they were used and what purpose they served within the structure. Some stones were relatively manageable compared with others, while certain blocks became enormously heavy and far more difficult to transport. This variation influenced nearly every stage of construction, from quarrying and shaping to movement and final placement. Smaller blocks still demanded substantial physical effort to move and position. Even stones considered modest in size could weigh far more than a modern person could lift alone. Groups of workers therefore remained necessary throughout the process. Yet the larger stones created an entirely different level of difficulty. Increasing weight changes more than simple effort. It changes balance, friction, coordination, and risk. A heavier object becomes harder to start moving, harder to stop, and more dangerous if control is lost. Ancient builders needed different methods and greater planning whenever larger blocks entered the construction process. Modern people experience smaller versions of this principle in everyday life. Moving a chair across a room requires little preparation because the object remains light and easy to control. Moving a large refrigerator is completely different. More people become necessary, movement slows down, and careful coordination suddenly matters much more. The object cannot simply be dragged carelessly through narrow spaces without creating risk of damage or injury. Pyramid builders face similar challenges on a far larger scale. The heavier the stone became, the more organization and planning the movement required. Weight influences how objects respond to force. A lighter block may begin sliding after only moderate effort, while a heavier block resists movement much more strongly because of the greater pressure pressing downward against the ground beneath it. This increased pressure also creates greater friction, which makes movement more difficult. Workers therefore needed methods capable of overcoming that resistance without losing stability or damaging the stone itself. Larger blocks likely required additional laborers, smoother movement surfaces, and slower, more controlled transport compared with smaller stones. The size of certain pyramid blocks still surprises engineers and historians today. Some stones used in ancient Egyptian construction weighed as much as several modern vehicles combined. Looking at these massive blocks can feel almost confusing, because the human brain naturally compares them against familiar modern experiences. Many people have never seen a single piece of stone larger than a kitchen countertop or garden wall. Standing beside pyramid stones reveals something entirely different. These blocks were not decorative pieces moved by small crews. They were massive structural components requiring coordinated human effort on an enormous scale. Large blocks also introduced greater risk during shaping and transport. A smaller stone might survive minor mistakes or uneven movement without serious consequences. Larger blocks behave differently because of their mass. If a heavy block shifted unexpectedly during movement, the force involved could crack the stone, damage equipment, or injure nearby workers. Ancient builders therefore needed stable methods that prioritize control rather than speed. Careless movement became far more dangerous as stone size increased. The challenge becomes easier to picture when imagining how difficult it can be to control momentum even in ordinary situations. A person carrying a small bucket of water can stop suddenly without much trouble. Someone pushing a heavily loaded cart downhill must think carefully about balance and braking, because the moving weight creates its own force. Large pyramid blocks behaved in similar ways. Once movement began, workers needed systems capable of maintaining control across uneven terrain and long transport distances. Stone size also influenced labor organization. Smaller blocks may have required fewer workers during movement and placement, while larger stones likely demanded larger coordinated teams. This affected scheduling, transport routes, and preparation across the construction site. Ancient pyramid building therefore depended not only on physical strength, but also on organization and communication. Workers needed to move together in coordinated ways while maintaining rhythm and balance during transport. Even slight confusion among laborers could interrupt movement or create instability around heavy loads. Another important detail is that builders probably did not move every stone using identical methods. Different block sizes likely required adjustments depending on terrain, distance, and purpose within the pyramid. Smaller stones may have allowed greater flexibility, while massive blocks demanded specially prepared routes and larger work teams. Construction methods therefore evolved around practical realities rather than rigid uniform systems. The builders adapted according to the demands of the material itself. The pyramids could never have been built through isolated effort by a few individuals working alone. Every stage of construction depended on large groups of people moving in coordinated ways across long periods of time. Quarry workers removed stone from the earth, while others shaped blocks, prepared transport routes, organized supplies, and managed placement near the growing structure. Pyramid construction operated more like a living system than a simple building project. Thousands of separate actions needed to connect smoothly so that stone, labor, and planning continued moving forward without constant interruption. Coordination became especially important whenever heavy blocks were transported across land. Large groups of workers likely pulled together using ropes, while others guided movement from the sides or adjusted surfaces beneath the stone. For this process to succeed, people needed to move with shared timing and rhythm. If one section of workers pulled too quickly, while another lost pace, the stone could shift unevenly or lose momentum entirely. Modern rowing teams provide a useful comparison because their speed depends less on individual strength and more on coordinated movement. A boat moves efficiently when everyone works in rhythm together. Pyramid labor operated through similar principles of timing, repetition, and shared effort. Planning supported this coordination long before physical work began each day. Workers needed access to tools, water, food, and transport materials, while construction crews required organized schedules that directed labor where it was most needed. Large building projects quickly become inefficient when supplies arrive late or workers interfere with one another's tasks. Ancient Egyptian builders therefore relied on systems capable of maintaining steady progress over many years. The pyramids were not built through chaotic bursts of activity. They depended on organized routines repeated carefully over time. Labor during pyramid construction was likely divided into specialized groups with different roles and responsibilities. Some workers focused primarily on quarrying, while others shaped stone or managed transport. Additional groups may have prepared ramps, maintained tools, or supported food distribution for labor crews. Dividing labor in this way improves efficiency, because repeated experience allows workers to become more skilled at specific tasks over time. A person performing the same activity regularly often develops smoother movements, better judgment, and greater consistency compared with someone constantly switching between unrelated responsibilities. Organization helped reduce wasted effort during transport and placement. A large stone block sitting motionless represented delayed progress because workers, tools, and prepared surfaces remained occupied without advancing construction. Maintaining movement, therefore, became important for efficiency. This did not mean rushing carelessly. Instead, builders likely developed routines that allowed labor crews to continue working steadily without constant confusion or unnecessary delay. Repetition helped workers understand where to stand, when to pull, and how to respond during difficult movements. Ancient Egyptian society itself also contributed to the possibility of such large-scale organization. The Nile River supported agricultural systems capable of feeding substantial populations, especially during periods when flood cycles produced fertile farmland. Reliable food supplies helped support laborers who could participate in construction projects beyond immediate survival needs. Large organized workforces become difficult to maintain when societies struggle constantly for basic resources. The stability provided by agriculture allowed Egypt to direct labor and planning toward projects lasting many years. There has long been debate about exactly how pyramid workers lived and organized themselves during construction. Older popular myths often describe the pyramids as projects built entirely through slave labor under brutal conditions. Modern archaeological evidence presents a more complex picture. Many workers appear to have been organized laborers who received food, housing, and medical care while participating in state construction projects. Large worker settlements discovered near pyramid sites suggest systems designed to support ongoing organized labor rather than temporary chaotic crowds gathered without planning. This changes how many people imagine the pyramids themselves. Instead of viewing the structures only as isolated monuments rising from the desert, it becomes easier to picture entire communities supporting construction activity nearby. Bakers prepared food, while workers transported stone. Tool makers repaired worn equipment, while planners directed labor crews toward different tasks. Water carriers, cooks, and administrators all contributed indirectly to the growing structure. Pyramid construction therefore depended on far more than the workers physically moving stone blocks. It relied on interconnected systems supporting thousands of people over long stretches of time. Teamwork became one of the most important forces holding the entire process together. A single person could not move massive stone blocks alone regardless of strength or determination. The pyramids emerged because large groups learned how to combine effort through organization and repetition. Each worker contributed only a small part of the overall structure during any single day, yet those repeated contributions slowly accumulated into large, visible results over many years. The finished pyramids stand today not only as monuments of stone and geometry, but also as reminders of what coordinated human effort can achieve when thousands of people work together toward a shared purpose with patience and consistency. Once stone blocks had been quarried, shaped, and prepared, another enormous challenge still remained. The builders needed to move those heavy blocks across land toward the growing pyramid. Even today, transporting extremely heavy materials requires specialized equipment, careful planning, and controlled movement. Ancient Egyptian workers faced the same basic physical problem using far simpler tools. The stone itself did not become lighter, simply because the builders lived thousands of years ago. Gravity, weight, and friction behaved exactly as they do today. The workers therefore needed practical methods capable of moving enormous blocks steadily across rough desert terrain without losing control. Many historians believe large stone blocks were often transported by sliding them across prepared surfaces using sledges. A sledge functions somewhat like a flat platform, resting directly against the ground beneath it. Unlike wheeled vehicles, which depend on rolling movement, sledges slide forward while carrying heavy loads across the surface below. This method may seem inefficient at first, yet under certain conditions sliding can become surprisingly effective, especially when transporting extremely heavy objects across relatively level terrain. Ancient builders likely discovered through experience that carefully prepared sliding surfaces could reduce difficulty during transport. Friction became one of the most important physical forces influencing the entire process. Friction is the resistance created when two surfaces move against one another. Anyone who has tried pushing a heavy piece of furniture across a carpet has experienced friction directly. Rough surfaces grip more strongly, while smoother surfaces allow easier movement. The heavier the object becomes, the greater the friction pressing downward between the surfaces involved. Pyramid builders therefore needed ways to reduce resistance enough that groups of workers could maintain steady movement over long distances. One fascinating detail comes from ancient Egyptian artwork, showing workers pouring water onto the ground ahead of moving sledges. Modern scientific experiments suggest this may have reduced friction by helping sand particles stick together more firmly beneath the sledge. Dry, loose sand shifts unevenly beneath heavy weight, which increases resistance during movement. Slightly damp sand behaves differently because the grains hold together more consistently, creating a firmer surface. This small adjustment may have made transport more controlled and efficient. The idea can be compared to walking along a loose sandy beach, compared with walking across firmer damp sand near the waterline. Dry sand shifts heavily beneath each step, making movement tiring and unstable. Firmer damp sand provides more support because the surface holds together better beneath pressure. Ancient Egyptian workers may have used similar observations while preparing transport routes for heavy stone movement. Even small reductions in friction could save enormous amounts of labor when repeated across thousands of blocks over many years. Prepared movement surfaces likely became extremely important during pyramid construction. Workers may have cleared routes, compacted ground, or added materials that improved sliding conditions beneath heavy sledges. Rough, uneven terrain increases resistance and creates instability during transport. Sudden bumps or shifting surfaces could damage stone, interrupt movement, or create danger for nearby laborers. Better prepared routes helped workers maintain greater control while reducing wasted effort. Construction, therefore, depended not only on moving stone, but also on preparing the environment through which the stone traveled. Sliding heavy stone also required workers to maintain controlled rhythm and timing during movement. If pulling forces became uneven, the block could twist slightly or lose forward momentum. Labor crews therefore likely coordinated their movements carefully while adjusting ropes and guiding sledges along prepared paths. Movement may have been slow, yet steady, controlled progress mattered more than sudden bursts of speed. A block that continued moving gradually remained far more useful than one that became stuck or unstable. The physical force required to move these stones remains impressive even by modern standards. Large blocks resisted movement continuously because gravity pressed their weight downward against the earth beneath them. Workers needed to generate enough pulling force to overcome that resistance while maintaining balance and coordination at the same time. Every successful movement represented a combination of strength, timing, and preparation working together. The process demanded endurance because transport likely continued hour after hour beneath intense desert heat. One important detail about friction is that it can become both helpful and problematic depending on the situation. Too much friction makes heavy objects difficult to move. Too little friction creates loss of control because surfaces slide too easily. Modern vehicle tires, for example, depend on balanced friction that allows movement while still maintaining grip against the road. Ancient pyramid builders faced similar concerns during stone transport. The goal was not to eliminate friction completely, but to reduce it enough that controlled movement became manageable for organized labor crews. Moving pyramid stones across the landscape required far more than simple strength alone. The builders needed enough force to overcome the enormous resistance created by weight, friction, and uneven terrain. In physics, force is the push or pull that changes the motion of an object. A light object may begin moving with only a small amount of effort, while a massive stone block resists movement far more strongly because of its weight pressing downward against the ground beneath it. Ancient Egyptian workers confronted this reality every day during pyramid construction. The stone itself constantly resisted movement, and only organized human effort could slowly overcome that resistance. Groups of workers generated this force together through coordinated pulling and steady motion. A single individual could contribute only a limited amount of strength, but many workers combining effort at the same time created far greater pulling power. This principle remains familiar even in ordinary life. A person struggling alone to move a heavy object may fail completely, yet several people working together can often shift the same object with surprising ease. Pyramid construction depended heavily on this multiplication of effort through cooperation and timing. The process likely required workers to maintain rhythm during transport. Pulling at random moments wastes energy because force becomes uneven across the ropes and sledges. Coordinated movement allows force to combine more effectively in a single direction. Modern tug-of-war teams demonstrate the same principle clearly. Victory depends not only on strength, but also on timing and rhythm between participants. If everyone pulls together at the same moment, force becomes much more effective than scattered effort applied inconsistently. Ancient labor crews transporting pyramid stones probably relied on similar patterns of coordinated movement. Some historians believe workers may have used chants, calls, or rhythmic sounds to help maintain timing during difficult movements. Repeated rhythm helps large groups coordinate physical activity more smoothly, especially during exhausting labor performed over long periods. Rowers, soldiers, and construction crews throughout history have often relied on rhythm to synchronize movement and conserve energy. Even today, athletes lifting heavy objects together frequently count aloud before applying force at the same moment. Human bodies naturally perform difficult group tasks more efficiently when movement becomes organized through shared rhythm. The movement of heavy stone almost certainly occurred gradually rather than quickly. Modern people sometimes imagine ancient builders dragging blocks rapidly across the desert, yet large weight behaves differently in reality. Heavy objects resist sudden acceleration because of inertia. The tendency of an object to resist changes in motion. Starting movement likely required tremendous effort at first, while maintaining steady sliding became somewhat easier once momentum developed. Workers therefore probably focused on slow controlled movement instead of bursts of speed that could create instability or loss of control. A useful comparison is pushing a stalled vehicle. The hardest part often comes at the beginning when the car remains motionless and friction resists movement strongly. Once the vehicle begins rolling, maintaining motion requires less effort than starting it initially. Pyramid blocks behaved in similar ways during transport. Labor crews likely strained hardest during the first moments of movement before settling into steadier pulling rhythms once the stone continued sliding across prepared surfaces. Planning became essential because force alone could not solve every transport problem. Workers needed routes prepared in advance while supervisors likely considered terrain, distance, and available labor before movement began. Large stone blocks could not simply wander across the landscape without organization. Narrow pathways, uneven surfaces, or sudden obstacles could interrupt transport and waste valuable energy. Better planning reduced unnecessary difficulty while helping crews maintain steady progress toward the pyramid site. Physics influenced every stage of pyramid transport, whether the builders described those ideas scientifically or not. Gravity constantly pulled downward on every stone block. Friction resisted movement across the ground. Momentum affected how blocks behaved once sliding began. Force needed to be applied carefully enough to maintain control while overcoming resistance. Ancient workers learned these behaviors through direct experience, repeated over generations. They may not have written mathematical equations describing motion, yet they understood physical behavior through observation and labor carried out day after day. The gradual pace of pyramid transport also reveals something important about the rhythm of ancient construction itself. Modern society often values speed above almost everything else. Machines complete difficult tasks rapidly, while industries compete constantly for greater efficiency and shorter production times. Pyramid construction unfolded according to a much slower rhythm, shaped by physical endurance and steady repetition. Workers pulled heavy stone beneath the heat of the desert, while movement advanced little by little across prepared ground. The process demanded patience because progress accumulated gradually rather than instantly. Transporting stone across flat ground was already difficult, yet pyramid construction introduced another enormous challenge as the structure gradually grew taller. The builders not only needed to move heavy blocks across the landscape, but also raise them upward, layer by layer, as the pyramid slowly climbed higher above the desert floor. Lifting massive stone directly into the air would have required impossible amounts of force, using the technology available at the time. Ancient Egyptian builders therefore likely relied on ramps and inclined surfaces that allowed blocks to move upward gradually instead of vertically. An inclined surface changes how force works during movement. Instead of lifting a heavy object straight upward against gravity all at once, a ramp spreads that effort across a longer distance. The object travels farther, but the amount of force needed at any single moment becomes smaller and more manageable. Modern wheelchair ramps follow the same physical principle. Climbing directly upward onto a raised platform requires much more effort than moving gradually upward along a sloped path. Ancient builders applied this same understanding on a vastly larger scale while transporting pyramid stones. The relationship between slope and force became extremely important during construction. A very steep ramp reduces travel distance, but demands greater pulling force because gravity resists upward movement more strongly. A gentler ramp requires less force at any given moment, yet it also becomes much longer and demands more building material and space. Pyramid builders therefore likely balance these factors carefully while creating transport routes suitable for heavy stone movement. The angle of the ramp directly influenced how difficult the work became for labor crews pulling the blocks upward. Historians still debate the exact forms of ramps used during pyramid construction. Some theories suggest long straight ramps extending outward from one side of the pyramid, while others propose spiraling ramps wrapping gradually around the structure as it rose higher. Additional theories describe combinations of different ramp systems used during separate stages of construction. Although the precise details remain uncertain, most explanations agree that inclined surfaces probably played a major role in helping workers raise heavy stone upward over time. Building the ramps themselves likely required enormous labor in addition to the pyramid construction already underway. Workers may have used mud brick, compacted earth, limestone debris, or other materials to create broad sloping pathways capable of supporting repeated transport activity. These ramps needed enough strength and stability to handle massive weight moving upward continuously. As the pyramid grew taller, the transport systems around it probably changed as well. Construction was therefore not a single unchanging process, but an evolving system adapting gradually as height increased. The upward movement of stone almost certainly remained slow and controlled. Pulling heavy blocks uphill creates additional resistance because gravity actively works against the direction of movement. Workers therefore needed coordinated effort, stable footing, and carefully prepared surfaces to maintain progress. A sudden loss of control on a ramp could become extremely dangerous because the weight of the stone naturally wanted to slide back downward. Labor crews likely moved carefully while maintaining tension and balance throughout the climb. A useful comparison can be found in pushing a heavily loaded cart uphill. On flat ground, movement may remain difficult but manageable. Once the path begins rising upward, the weight suddenly feels much heavier because gravity now resists the movement more directly. Pyramid builders encountered this same challenge with stones weighing many thousands of pounds. Ramps allowed movement to happen gradually, yet the labor still demanded tremendous physical effort and careful coordination between workers. Layered construction also became one of the defining features of pyramid building during this stage. The structure did not appear all at once in its final form. Instead, it developed layer by layer over long periods of time. Each completed section created the foundation for the next level above it. Workers raised stone gradually, while the pyramid slowly expanded upward and inward at the same time. This layered process helped distribute weight downward through the lower sections already completed beneath the growing structure. The pyramid therefore resembled a constantly changing construction landscape, rather than a finished monument during most of its existence. Ramps extended outward, while labor crews moved stone across active work areas filled with dust, tools, and repeated movement. New layers formed gradually as workers positioned additional blocks onto rising levels. From a distance, the structure may have appeared calm and geometric, even during construction, yet nearby the environment was likely filled with steady physical activity continuing year after year. There is something deeply practical about the way ramps solved the problem of height. Ancient builders did not defeat gravity through mysterious methods or impossible technology. Instead, they worked with the natural behavior of force and movement. By increasing distance through inclined surfaces, they reduced the immediate force required to raise heavy stone upward. This reflects one of the most important ideas in engineering itself. Many successful designs do not eliminate physical limitations. They find ways to work within those limitations intelligently and consistently over time. As the pyramids gradually rose higher above the desert floor, each completed layer became responsible for supporting everything built above it. This relationship between lower and upper sections formed one of the most important principles in pyramid construction. Every new level depended entirely on the strength and stability of the layers already completed beneath it. A weak foundation could create shifting, cracking, or imbalance as additional weight accumulated overhead. Builders therefore needed each stage of construction to remain stable before continuing upward with the next section. The pyramid developed gradually through this layered process over many years. Workers did not simply pile stone upward randomly into a triangular shape. Construction followed a careful sequence where each completed stage prepared the structure for the next phase of building. Lower levels had to remain reliable enough to carry enormous weight before higher sections could safely expand above them. This sequencing influenced nearly every construction decision because stability depended on how well the layers worked together as a connected system. Modern buildings still follow the same basic principle. The upper floors of a skyscraper rely entirely on the lower framework beneath them. Engineers carefully calculate how weight travels downward through columns, walls, and foundations into the ground below. If lower sections fail, everything above becomes vulnerable. Ancient Egyptian builders may not have used modern engineering equations, yet they clearly understood through experience that stable lower layers were essential for successful construction. The pyramid could only rise higher if the supporting structure beneath remained dependable. Weight distribution became increasingly important as the structure grew taller. Every new block added additional pressure onto the layers below. The builders therefore needed surfaces that remained level, tightly fitted, and capable of transferring weight evenly downward through the pyramid. Uneven pressure creates weak points where shifting or cracking becomes more likely over time. Proper sequencing reduced those risks because workers could focus on maintaining balance and alignment at each stage before additional weight complicated the structure further. A useful comparison can be found in stacking heavy boxes inside a storage room. If the lower boxes remain balanced and secure, additional layers can usually be added safely above them. If the base becomes unstable or uneven, the stack quickly becomes dangerous as weight increases higher up. Pyramid construction followed the same physical reality on an enormous scale. Stability was not something added afterward. It had to exist continuously throughout the building process from the very beginning. The design of the pyramid itself strongly influenced how construction unfolded. The wide lower base created a broad, stable platform capable of carrying tremendous weight, while each higher layer gradually became smaller as the structure narrowed upward. This design naturally reduced pressure near the top because upper sections contained less mass than the enormous lower levels beneath them. Builders were therefore working with a shape that helped distribute weight downward in a controlled and predictable way. Construction methods needed to match this design carefully. Workers likely completed large sections of lower levels before concentrating heavily on higher areas because the lower structure formed the foundation, supporting everything above it. The pyramid was not only a finished shape, it was also a process unfolding through planned stages over time. Design and construction method remained closely connected throughout the project. Maintaining stability during construction likely demanded constant observation and correction. Workers may have checked alignment carefully while adjusting surfaces and placement as additional layers accumulated. Small irregularities near the lower levels could create larger visible problems much farther upward. Repetition and consistency therefore became extremely important. Builders needed methods reliable enough to produce stable results again and again across thousands of separate stone placements. There is also something remarkable about how slowly the pyramid shape emerged over time. Modern people often picture the finished monument instantly when thinking about ancient Egypt. Yet for many years the pyramid existed as an active construction site, still climbing gradually upward layer by layer. Workers standing nearby may not have seen the complete structure for a long time because only sections existed during different phases of construction. The final shape appeared slowly through accumulated effort, repeated over many years. Sequencing helped organize this enormous task into manageable stages. Instead of attempting impossible movements all at once, builders divided construction into layers where each completed section created the platform for future progress. This approach reduced risk while helping labor crews maintain order during large-scale building activity. Sequencing remains one of the most important ideas in engineering because complex projects become far more manageable when broken into stable, organized stages, completed one after another. The pyramids continue standing today, partly because the builders respected these physical realities throughout construction. Weight needed stable support. Lower layers needed to remain reliable before higher sections expanded above them. Careful sequencing helped maintain balance and alignment as the structure grew larger over time. The finished pyramid may appear simple and calm against the desert horizon, yet beneath that geometric form lies an enormous history of planning, stability, and repeated careful construction carried out layer by layer across many years of patient human effort. One of the most important reasons the pyramid survived for such long periods of time is the shape itself. At first glance, the pyramid appears simple. A broad base rises upward through sloping sides until the structure narrows toward a single point near the top. Yet beneath this calm geometric form lies a stable design that works naturally with gravity rather than struggling against it. The pyramid shape helps direct enormous weight downward through the structure in a balanced and controlled way. This made the design especially suitable for large stone construction using the materials and methods available in ancient Egypt. The wide base formed the foundation supporting the entire structure above it. Because the lower section covered such a large area, the immense weight of the pyramid could spread across the ground more evenly instead of concentrating pressure into smaller points. This greatly improved stability over long periods of time. A narrow foundation beneath such enormous weight would create far greater risk of shifting or collapse because pressure would become too concentrated in limited areas. The broad base therefore acted almost like a giant platform, distributing the mass of the pyramid downward into the earth beneath it. Modern snowshoes provide a simple comparison for this principle. A person walking across deep snow in ordinary shoes sinks more easily because their weight presses into a small area. Snowshoes spread that same weight across a much larger surface, reducing pressure and helping the person remain supported above the snow. Pyramid foundations worked through a similar idea on a vastly larger scale. The broad lower structure spread enormous weight across the ground in ways that improved long-term stability. As the pyramid rose higher, the structure gradually narrowed toward the top. This meant the upper levels contained far less weight than the enormous lower sections beneath them. The design naturally reduced stress higher in the structure because less stone needed support as the pyramid climbed upward. Gravity continuously pulled downward on every block, yet the sloping form helped direct much of that force inward and downward through the lower layers. The shape itself, therefore, became part of the engineering solution. This narrowing upward design also helped the pyramid resist certain types of structural failure. Tall vertical walls can become vulnerable over time because gravity pulls directly downward while outside forces push sideways against the structure. The sloping sides of the pyramid reduce some of that risk by guiding weight downward toward the broad, stable base. In many ways, the pyramid behaves less like a tall tower balancing upward and more like a mountain resting heavily against the ground beneath it. The geometry of the pyramid also reduced the difficulty of supporting upper sections during construction. Because each higher layer became slightly smaller than the one beneath it, workers gradually handled less material as the structure climbed upward. Lower levels demanded vast quantities of stone because the base covered such a wide area. Higher sections narrowed steadily, reducing the total mass requiring placement. This helped make the project more manageable over time, while maintaining structural balance throughout the construction process. One reason the pyramids continue fascinating modern people is that the design feels both simple and enormous at the same time. There are no moving mechanical systems hidden inside and no delicate framework supporting the outer surface. Instead, the structure depends primarily on mass, balance, and geometry working together steadily over time. The pyramid shape may appear visually calm, yet it represents a deep understanding of how weight behaves when vast quantities of stone are stacked upward, layer by layer. The long survival of the pyramids demonstrates how effective this design became. Over thousands of years, the structures have endured wind, heat, shifting temperatures, and the gradual erosion affecting exposed stone surfaces across the desert environment. Although outer casing stones and surface sections have been damaged or removed over time, the core geometric form remains remarkably stable. This endurance reflects not only the strength of the stone itself, but also the effectiveness of the pyramid shape in distributing weight safely downward through the structure. There is something almost timeless about the visual balance created by pyramid geometry. The wide, grounded base creates a sense of stability, while the narrowing upper form draws the eye gradually upward toward the sky. Even modern people often react instinctively to this balance because the structure appears solid, calm, and unmoving against the desert landscape. Much of that feeling comes directly from the geometry itself. The shape communicates stability because it physically behaves in a stable way under enormous weight. The pyramids therefore stand as more than collections of stone blocks arranged into large monuments. They are examples of geometry working together with gravity, mass, and physical design to create structures capable of lasting across immense stretches of time. The wide base, narrowing upper levels, and careful weight distribution all contributed to long-term stability. Through this simple, yet remarkably effective geometric form, ancient Egyptian builders transformed millions of separate stones into structures that continue rising above the desert thousands of years after the final blocks were placed into position. The enormous weight of a pyramid depends almost entirely on the strength of its lower layers. Every stone placed near the base supports not only its own weight, but also the tremendous mass of the structure rising above it. As additional layers accumulated over time, pressure traveled steadily downward through the pyramid until it eventually reached the ground beneath the foundation. The builders therefore needed the lower sections to remain stable because any weakness near the bottom could affect everything higher above it. In many ways, the lower layers carried the responsibility for the entire structure. This downward movement of weight is one of the most important principles in construction. Gravity continuously pulls every object toward the earth, and buildings must safely guide that force downward without creating dangerous stress points. Modern skyscrapers rely on steel frameworks and deep foundations to transfer weight into the ground. Ancient pyramids accomplished something similar, using vast quantities of stone arranged in stable geometric forms. The lower sections absorbed and distributed pressure created by millions of blocks resting above them. The design of the pyramid helped reduce the risk of collapse because the structure became smaller as it rose upward. Lower levels carried great weight, yet the upper sections contained progressively less mass. This reduced stress higher in the structure, while directing most pressure downward into the broad, stable base. The pyramid shape therefore worked naturally with gravity instead of resisting it. Ancient builders were creating a structure where each layer helped support the next through balance and weight distribution. A useful comparison can be found in the roots and trunk of a large tree. The upper branches may spread outward widely, yet the strength of the tree depends heavily on the lower trunk and root system, supporting everything above. If the lower structure weakens, the entire tree becomes vulnerable, regardless of how healthy the upper branches appear. Pyramid construction followed a similar physical reality. The stability of the lower levels determined whether the structure could safely continue rising upward over time. The geometry of the pyramid also created strength through compression. Stone performs especially well when heavy weight presses downward upon it evenly. Unlike materials that bend easily under pressure, large stone blocks become highly stable when properly stacked and supported beneath compressive force. The pyramid shape encouraged much of the weight to press inward and downward through the layers below, rather than creating large unsupported sections vulnerable to bending or collapse. In this sense, the pyramid became almost self-supporting. Every completed layer helped stabilize the structure beneath it, while the sloping sides directed pressure inward toward the center of mass. There were no delicate outer walls holding hidden weight inside. The pyramid functioned as one enormous connected form where millions of stones worked together under compression. Stability emerged from the relationship between shape, gravity, and material strength, acting together continuously over time. The phrase "form follows function" describes an important idea in design, where the shape of something develops according to its practical purpose. The pyramids reflect this idea remarkably well. Their shape was not chosen only for appearance. The broad base, sloping sides, and narrowing upper sections all contributed directly to structural stability. The form itself helped solve the engineering challenges created by massive stone construction. Appearance and function became closely connected within the final design. There is also something quietly elegant about how simple the underlying solution appears. Ancient Egyptian builders did not rely on hidden machinery or fragile systems requiring constant adjustment. Instead, they used stone, gravity, and geometry together in ways that created lasting stability. Every lower layer supported the weight above, while the pyramid shape reduced dangerous stress throughout the structure. The finished result appears calm and almost effortless from a distance, yet beneath that still geometric form lies an extraordinary understanding of balance, compression, and long-term structural strength developed through patient human effort across many years of construction. As the pyramids continued rising layer by layer, the positioning of each individual stone became increasingly important. A massive structure built from millions of blocks depends heavily on alignment because every stone influences the stability of the layers surrounding it. If blocks were placed carelessly or unevenly, pressure could shift unpredictably through the structure over time. The builders therefore worked carefully to position stones in ways that maintained balance, supported weight evenly, and reduced instability throughout the pyramid. Alignment begins with understanding how surfaces meet one another under pressure. When two stones rest together evenly, the weight above them spreads across a broader area. If the surfaces touch unevenly, pressure concentrates into smaller points that become more vulnerable to shifting or damage. Ancient builders therefore attempted to create stable contact between neighboring blocks through shaping, leveling, and careful placement. The tighter and more consistent the fit became, the more effectively the structure could distribute weight downward through the layers below. Leveling surfaces became one of the most important parts of stone preparation and placement. Workers likely checked surfaces repeatedly while adjusting blocks to reduce uneven areas before final positioning. A level surface allows weight to travel more predictably downward rather than concentrating pressure toward one edge or corner. This improved stability throughout the structure while reducing the chance of unwanted movement between stones over long periods of time. A useful comparison can be found in placing a table on uneven ground. If one leg rests higher than the others, the table begins rocking because the weight is not balanced properly across the supporting points. Once the ground becomes level, the structure immediately feels more stable because pressure distributes evenly beneath it. Pyramid builders were solving similar physical problems while working with stones weighing thousands of pounds stacked into enormous layered structures. Reducing gaps between blocks also improved structural reliability. Large empty spaces create areas where stone lacks proper support beneath pressure. Over time, unsupported sections become more vulnerable to cracking, settling, or shifting. Tightly fitted blocks help transfer weight more evenly throughout the pyramid, while increasing overall stability. Some sections of pyramid construction demonstrate remarkably close-fitting stonework, even by modern standards, especially along important outer surfaces and internal chambers. This close fitting also reduced movement within the structure itself. Stone expands and contracts slightly, with changing temperature over long periods, while shifting ground and accumulated pressure can gradually affect alignment. Tightly fitted blocks help limit unwanted movement because the stones support one another more consistently. A well-connected structure behaves more like a single unified mass rather than separate unstable pieces resting loosely together. The wide base formed the foundation supporting the entire structure above it. Because the lower section covered such a large area, the immense weight of the pyramid could spread across the ground more evenly instead of concentrating pressure into smaller points. This greatly improved stability over long periods of time. A narrow foundation beneath such enormous weight would create far greater risk of shifting or collapse because pressure would become too concentrated in limited areas. The broad base therefore acted almost like a giant platform, distributing the mass of the pyramid downward into the earth beneath it. Modern snowshoes provide a simple comparison for this principle. A person walking across deep snow in ordinary shoes sinks more easily because their weight presses into a small area. Snowshoes spread that same weight across a much larger surface, reducing pressure and helping the person remain supported above the snow. Pyramid foundations worked through a similar idea on a vastly larger scale. The broad lower structure spread enormous weight across the ground in ways that improved long-term stability. As the pyramid rose higher, the structure gradually narrowed toward the top. This meant the upper levels contained far less weight than the enormous lower sections beneath them. The design naturally reduced stress higher in the structure because less stone needed support as the pyramid climbed upward. Gravity continuously pulled downward on every block, yet the sloping form helped direct much of that force inward and downward through the lower layers. The shape itself, therefore, became part of the engineering solution. This narrowing upward design also helped the pyramid resist certain types of structural failure. Tall vertical walls can become vulnerable over time because gravity pulls directly downward while outside forces push sideways against the structure. The sloping sides of the pyramid reduce some of that risk by guiding weight downward toward the broad, stable base. In many ways, the pyramid behaves less like a tall tower balancing upward and more like a mountain resting heavily against the ground beneath it. The geometry of the pyramid also reduced the difficulty of supporting upper sections during construction. Because each higher layer became slightly smaller than the one beneath it, workers gradually handled less material as the structure climbed upward. Lower levels demanded vast quantities of stone because the base covered such a wide area. Higher sections narrowed steadily, reducing the total mass requiring placement. This helped make the project more manageable over time, while maintaining structural balance throughout the construction process. One reason the pyramids continue fascinating modern people is that the design feels both simple and enormous at the same time. There are no moving mechanical systems hidden inside, and no delicate framework supporting the outer surface. Instead, the structure depends primarily on mass, balance, and geometry, working together steadily over time. The pyramid shape may appear visually calm, yet it represents a deep understanding of how weight behaves when vast quantities of stone are stacked upward, layer by layer. The long survival of the pyramids demonstrates how effective this design became. Over thousands of years, the structures have endured wind, heat, shifting temperatures, and the gradual erosion affecting exposed stone surfaces across the desert environment. Although outer casing stones and surface sections have been damaged or removed over time, the core geometric form remains remarkably stable. This endurance reflects not only the strength of the stone itself, but also the effectiveness of the pyramid shape in distributing weight safely downward through the structure. There is something almost timeless about the visual balance created by pyramid geometry. The wide, grounded base creates a sense of stability, while the narrowing upper form draws the eye gradually upward toward the sky. Even modern people often react instinctively to this balance because the structure appears solid, calm, and unmoving against the desert landscape. Much of that feeling comes directly from the geometry itself. The shape communicates stability because it physically behaves in a stable way under enormous weight. The pyramids therefore stand as more than collections of stone blocks arranged into large monuments. They are examples of geometry working together with gravity, mass, and physical design to create structures capable of lasting across immense stretches of time. The wide base, narrowing upper levels, and careful weight distribution all contributed to long-term stability. Through this simple yet remarkably effective geometric form, ancient Egyptian builders transformed millions of separate stones into structures that continue rising above the desert thousands of years after the final blocks were placed into position. The enormous weight of a pyramid depends almost entirely on the strength of its lower layers. Every stone placed near the base supports not only its own weight, but also the tremendous mass of the structure rising above it. As additional layers accumulated over time, pressure traveled steadily downward through the pyramid until it eventually reached the ground beneath the foundation. The builders therefore needed the lower sections to remain stable, because any weakness near the bottom could affect everything higher above it. In many ways, the lower layers carried the responsibility for the entire structure. This downward movement of weight is one of the most important principles in construction. Gravity continuously pulls every object toward the earth, and buildings must safely guide that force downward without creating dangerous stress points. Modern skyscrapers rely on steel frameworks and deep foundations to transfer weight into the ground. Ancient pyramids accomplish something similar, using vast quantities of stone arranged in stable geometric forms. The lower sections absorbed and distributed pressure created by millions of blocks resting above them. The design of the pyramid helped reduce the risk of collapse because the structure became smaller as it rose upward. Lower levels carried great weight, yet the upper sections contained progressively less mass. This reduced stress higher in the structure while directing most pressure downward into the broad, stable base. The pyramid shape therefore worked naturally with gravity instead of resisting it, Ancient builders were creating a structure where each layer helped support the next through balance and weight distribution. A useful comparison can be found in the roots and trunk of a large tree. The upper branches may spread outward widely, yet the strength of the tree depends heavily on the lower trunk and root system supporting everything above. If the lower structure weakens, the entire tree becomes vulnerable, regardless of how healthy the upper branches appear. Pyramid construction followed a similar physical reality. The stability of the lower levels determined whether the structure could safely continue rising upward over time. The geometry of the pyramid also created strength through compression. Stone performs especially well when heavy weight presses downward upon it evenly. Unlike materials that bend easily under pressure, large stone blocks become highly stable when properly stacked and supported beneath compressive force. The pyramid shape encouraged much of the weight to press inward and downward through the layers below, rather than creating large, unsupported sections vulnerable to bending or collapse. In this sense, the pyramid became almost self-supporting. Every completed layer helped stabilize the structure beneath it, while the sloping sides directed pressure inward toward the center of mass. There were no delicate outer walls holding hidden weight inside. The pyramid functioned as one enormous connected form where millions of stones worked together under compression. Stability emerged from the relationship between shape, gravity, and material strength, acting together continuously over time. The phrase form follows function describes an important idea in design, where the shape of something develops according to its practical purpose. The pyramids reflect this idea remarkably well. Their shape was not chosen only for appearance. The broad base, sloping sides, and narrowing upper sections all contributed directly to structural stability. The form itself helped solve the engineering challenges created by massive stone construction. Appearance and function became closely connected within the final design. There is also something quietly elegant about how simple the underlying solution appears. Ancient Egyptian builders did not rely on hidden machinery or fragile systems requiring constant adjustment. Instead, they used stone, gravity, and geometry together in ways that created lasting stability. Every lower layer supported the weight above, while the pyramid shape reduced dangerous stress throughout the structure. The finished result appears calm and almost effortless from a distance, yet beneath that still geometric form lies an extraordinary understanding of balance, compression, and long-term structural strength developed through patient human effort across many years of construction. As the pyramids continued rising layer by layer, the positioning of each individual stone became increasingly important. A massive structure built from millions of blocks depends heavily on alignment, because every stone influences the stability of the layers surrounding it. If blocks were placed carelessly or unevenly, pressure could shift unpredictably through the structure over time. The builders therefore worked carefully to position stones in ways that maintained balance, supported weight evenly, and reduced instability throughout the pyramid. Alignment begins with understanding how surfaces meet one another under pressure. When two stones rest together evenly, the weight above them spreads across a broader area. If the surfaces touch unevenly, pressure concentrates into smaller points that become more vulnerable to shifting or damage. Ancient builders therefore attempted to create stable contact between neighboring blocks through shaping, leveling, and careful placement. The tighter and more consistent the fit became, the more effectively the structure could distribute weight downward through the layers below. Leveling surfaces became one of the most important parts of stone preparation and placement. Workers likely checked surfaces repeatedly while adjusting blocks to reduce uneven areas before final positioning. A level surface allows weight to travel more predictably downward rather than concentrating pressure toward one edge or corner. This improves stability throughout the structure while reducing the chance of unwanted movement between stones over long periods of time. A useful comparison can be found in placing a table on uneven ground. If one leg rests higher than the others, the table begins rocking because the weight is not balanced properly across the supporting points. Once the ground becomes level, the structure immediately feels more stable because pressure distributes evenly beneath it. Pyramid builders were solving similar physical problems while working with stones weighing thousands of pounds stacked into enormous layered structures. Reducing gaps between blocks also improves structural reliability. Large empty spaces create areas where stone lacks proper support beneath pressure. Over time, unsupported sections become more vulnerable to cracking, settling, or shifting. Tightly fitted blocks help transfer weight more evenly throughout the pyramid while increasing overall stability. Some sections of pyramid construction demonstrate remarkably close-fitting stonework, even by modern standards, especially along important outer surfaces and internal chambers. This close fitting also reduced movement within the structure itself. Stone expands and contracts slightly, with changing temperature over long periods, while shifting ground and accumulated pressure can gradually affect alignment. Tightly fitted blocks help limit unwanted movement because the stones support one another more consistently. A well-connected structure behaves more like a single unified mass rather than separate unstable pieces resting loosely together. The process of alignment likely demanded constant attention from workers throughout construction. Heavy stone could not simply be dropped carelessly into place and forgotten. Labor crews probably guided blocks carefully while checking position and surface contact during placement. Small adjustments made during this stage may have prevented larger problems from developing higher in the pyramid later on. The builders therefore treated placement as a controlled process, requiring observation and correction rather than simple stacking alone. There is something remarkable about the patience hidden inside this level of precision. Modern people often associate accurate construction with advanced measuring equipment, laser systems, and powered machinery. Ancient pyramid builders relied instead on repeated checking, practical experience, and gradual correction while handling enormous materials under difficult conditions. Precision emerged through consistency and careful labor, repeated thousands of times across many years. The alignment of the pyramid also carried visual importance in addition to structural function. Straight lines, smooth surfaces, and balanced geometry helped create the calm, symmetrical appearance that still defines the pyramids today. Although stability remained essential, appearance clearly mattered as well. The builders were creating structures intended to appear orderly, permanent, and powerful against the surrounding desert landscape. Careful alignment therefore influenced both engineering and visual design at the same time. The more closely the stones fit together, the more unified the pyramid became as a complete structure. Weight traveled more smoothly downward, while movement between blocks remained limited. The builders transformed millions of separate pieces of limestone into stable, connected forms through alignment, leveling, and careful positioning carried out over long periods of time. The finished pyramid appears calm and solid, partly because so much attention was given to how each stone rested against the next, beneath the enormous pressure created by the structure above. One of the most important reasons pyramid construction achieved such remarkable stability was repetition. The builders performed many of the same physical tasks again and again over long periods of time, until methods became increasingly consistent and reliable. Quarry workers repeatedly cut stone from rock surfaces. Transport crews repeatedly moved heavy blocks across prepared routes. Placement teams repeatedly adjusted alignment and positioning during construction. Through this constant repetition, workers gradually improved accuracy while reducing mistakes that could weaken the structure over time. Human beings naturally become more efficient when repeating familiar actions regularly. A person learning to write by hand often begins slowly with uneven letters and awkward movements. After years of practice, those same motions become smooth and automatic. Musicians develop greater precision through repeated scales and exercises, while athletes improve coordination through continuous training. Pyramid workers likely experience similar improvement through repeated exposure to stone cutting, transport, and placement. Experience allowed movements to become more controlled, while practical judgment improved steadily over time. Accuracy in pyramid construction therefore did not depend entirely on advanced measuring systems or sudden moments of genius. Much of it emerged through repeated labor, performed carefully across many years. Workers learned how much force to apply during shaping, how surfaces behaved under pressure, and how to position blocks more effectively through direct experience. Repetition gradually transformed difficult physical tasks into organized routines that could produce increasingly reliable results. Consistency became especially important because the pyramid depended on millions of separate actions connecting together successfully. Even small irregularities repeated many times could create larger visible problems as construction continued upward. If alignment shifted slightly across one layer, the error could become more noticeable in higher sections built later. The builders therefore needed reliable methods capable of producing similar results repeatedly across vast quantities of stone. Organization played a major role in maintaining this consistency. Workers needed coordinated systems directing stone movement, placement order, and labor activity across active construction areas. Without organization, repetition alone would not guarantee reliable results. Materials could arrive at the wrong locations, while crews might interfere with one another's tasks. Pyramid construction therefore depended on systems capable of maintaining order, as thousands of people participated in different stages of the project over many years. The placement of each stone required attention because every block influenced the stability of neighboring surfaces. Workers likely checked alignment repeatedly while making small corrections during positioning. A carefully organized process helped ensure that mistakes remained limited before larger sections were added above them. Attention during early stages reduced greater problems later. This gradual correction process probably occurred continuously throughout construction rather than only at isolated moments. A useful comparison can be found in weaving fabric by hand. A single misplaced thread may appear unimportant at first, yet repeated mistakes gradually weaken the entire pattern and create visible irregularities across the finished material. Consistent attention during each step helps preserve the strength and appearance of the final product. Pyramid construction followed a similar reality. Careful placement repeated steadily over time helped maintain structural balance and visual order throughout the growing pyramid. Repetition also improved communication between workers. Labor crews performing the same tasks regularly likely developed shared rhythms, expectations, and routines that made coordination more efficient. Workers knew where to stand, when to pull, and how to respond during difficult movements, because those actions had been repeated many times before. Familiarity reduces confusion during complex physical activity, especially when large groups must work together under demanding conditions. Careful attention remained essential throughout the building process because the scale of the pyramids magnified every small decision. A minor mistake involving a single block could become much more difficult to correct once additional layers accumulated overhead. Workers therefore needed patience and focus during even routine tasks. Large structures often depend on countless small decisions performed correctly, rather than a few dramatic moments of achievement. There is something deeply human about the way repetition shaped pyramid construction. The finished structures appear enormous and almost timeless against the desert landscape, yet they were created through ordinary actions repeated steadily over many years. Workers cut stone, adjusted surfaces, pulled ropes, and checked alignment day after day beneath the Egyptian sun. Gradually, those repeated actions accumulated into stable geometric forms, capable of surviving across thousands of years. The pyramids therefore stand not only as monuments of engineering and geometry, but also as monuments of consistency itself. Repetition improved accuracy, while organization maintained order across massive construction projects. Careful attention during each stage helped preserve stability as the structure rose higher over time. Through patient, repeated labor carried out with increasing precision, millions of individual stones slowly became one of the most enduring architectural achievements in human history. When most people picture the pyramids today, they usually imagine rough stone surfaces, weathered by thousands of years of wind and desert erosion. Yet many pyramids originally appeared very different from the way they look now. Some were covered with smooth outer casing stones made from finer limestone that created bright reflective surfaces beneath the Egyptian sun. Instead of rough layered blocks being visible from a distance, the outer structure would have appeared far more even and refined, with smooth sloping sides rising cleanly toward the sky. These outer casing stones required greater precision than many of the rougher internal blocks hidden deeper within the pyramid. The visible exterior influenced the appearance of the entire structure, so workers spent additional effort shaping and fitting these stones carefully. Finer limestone became especially useful because its smoother texture allowed surfaces to be refined more effectively during preparation. This outer layer transformed the visual character of the pyramid from a massive stepped structure into something more polished and geometrically clean. The difference between rough inner stone and refined outer casing can be compared to the way modern buildings often contain hidden structural materials beneath carefully finished exterior surfaces. Inside a modern wall, there may be concrete, steel supports, and insulation that remain unseen once construction is complete. The outer surface receives greater visual attention because it defines how the structure appears to the outside world. Ancient pyramid builders followed a similar idea. The internal stone provided mass and stability, while the outer casing created a smoother and more finished appearance. Surface treatment became an important part of this process. Workers likely shaped, scraped, and adjusted casing stones repeatedly to reduce uneven areas and improve alignment between neighboring surfaces. The smoother the outer layer became, the more continuous the pyramid's sloping sides would appear from a distance. This required careful attention because even small irregularities become easier to notice across large flat surfaces exposed directly to sunlight. The choice of finer limestone for the outer layer also reflected an understanding that different materials behave differently during shaping and finishing. Some stone contains rough textures or irregular patterns that make smooth refinement more difficult. Finer limestone often allowed workers to achieve cleaner surfaces and tighter fitting joints between neighboring casing stones. Material variation therefore influenced not only construction strength, but appearance as well. Under bright sunlight, these smooth limestone surfaces may have appeared strikingly bright across the desert landscape. Fresh limestone reflects light strongly, especially when carefully finished and aligned across large, continuous surfaces. Some historians believe the pyramids may have appeared almost luminous at certain times of day as sunlight reflected from the polished casing stones. Modern people often experience the pyramids as ancient, weathered ruins, yet their original appearance was likely cleaner and brighter than many imagine today. This visual effect would have increased the sense of geometric precision already created by the pyramid shape itself. Smooth surfaces allow light and shadow to move cleanly across the structure, making the triangular form appear sharper and more unified from a distance. Rough, irregular stone breaks up those reflections and creates a more uneven visual texture. The casing stones therefore contributed strongly to the calm, symmetrical appearance associated with the pyramids. Surface treatment also served practical purposes beyond appearance alone. Tighter fitting outer stones help protect inner sections from weather exposure by creating more continuous exterior surfaces. Although the dry Egyptian climate reduced some forms of erosion compared with wetter regions of the world, wind and temperature still gradually affect exposed stone over long periods of time. Carefully fitted casing layers provided an additional protective barrier surrounding the inner structure beneath them. The gradual loss of many casing stones over centuries dramatically changed how the pyramids appear today. Earthquakes, erosion, and later stone removal projects stripped away large sections of the smooth exterior layers from some pyramids, exposing the rougher inner blocks beneath. This transformed the visual character of the structures over time. Modern visitors often see the pyramids as rugged stepped monuments, yet originally many would have appeared refined and visually unified. There is something fascinating about this contrast between the hidden inner structure and the carefully finished outer surface. Deep inside the pyramid, rougher blocks provided strength and mass largely unseen by the outside world. Around that core, finer limestone created smooth geometric forms visible across the desert landscape. Appearance and engineering worked together as part of the same design. The builders understood that materials, surfaces, and visual balance all contributed to the final impression created by the pyramids rising beneath the Egyptian sun. The pyramids were not built as single solid masses of identical stone from the inside outward. Instead, they developed through multiple layers that worked together to create strength, stability, and long-term durability. Deep within the structure, rougher limestone blocks formed the enormous inner mass responsible for supporting weight and maintaining the pyramid's shape. Around this inner core, more carefully prepared outer layers created smoother surfaces and additional protection against the surrounding environment. Each layer served a different purpose while contributing to the overall stability of the structure. The outer casing stones acted almost like a protective shell surrounding the inner pyramid beneath them. These smoother outer layers helped shield rougher internal stone from direct exposure to wind, temperature changes, and gradual erosion over long stretches of time. Although Egypt has a relatively dry climate, exposed stone still experiences slow weathering through heat, wind-blown sand, and natural environmental change. A tightly fitted outer layer reduced some of that exposure by creating a more continuous protective surface around the structure. Durability became one of the defining characteristics of pyramid design. The builders were creating structures intended to remain stable over long periods of time, rather than temporary buildings expected to last only a few generations. Material choice, weight distribution, and surface protection all contributed to this goal. Durable construction depends on more than strength alone. A structure must also resist gradual damage caused by environmental exposure and shifting pressure over time. The layered design of the pyramids helped improve that long-term resilience. Material properties strongly influenced how different sections of the pyramid were constructed. Rougher limestone provided reliable mass and compressive strength within the inner structure, while finer limestone allowed smoother finishing along the outer surfaces. Builders selected materials according to their practical qualities, rather than using every stone in exactly the same way. This reflects a sophisticated understanding that construction materials possess different strengths depending on how they are used. Detailed finishing work became especially important along the visible outer surfaces. Workers likely spent additional time smoothing casing stones, adjusting joints, and refining alignment to create cleaner geometric lines across the pyramid. These final adjustments demanded patience because small imperfections become easier to notice on large, smooth surfaces exposed directly to sunlight. The builders were creating not only strong structures, but visually balanced forms designed to appear orderly and precise across the desert landscape. The layered construction of the pyramids also helped spread pressure more evenly throughout the structure. Outer casing stones rested against underlying layers, while the inner mass supported the enormous weight pressing downward from above. The pyramid behaved less like separate independent sections and more like one connected system where each layer contributed to the overall stability. This interconnected design improved durability because force moved gradually through the structure rather than concentrating dangerously in isolated areas. Over thousands of years, some outer casing stones were removed, damaged or lost through erosion and human activity, yet the inner pyramids beneath them often remained standing because the enormous structural core continued supporting itself even after parts of the outer shell disappeared. This demonstrates how strongly the layered design contributed to long-term survival. The pyramids possessed multiple levels of support and protection working together rather than relying entirely on a single exposed surface. There is also something fascinating about the contrast between what is visible and what remains hidden inside the pyramids. Modern visitors often focus on the outer appearance because it dominates the landscape so dramatically. Yet much of the true strength lies deep within the massive inner layers rarely seen directly. The rough internal stone, hidden beneath smoother surfaces, carried enormous weight quietly and continuously across thousands of years. The visible beauty of the pyramid depended entirely on the hidden structural mass beneath it. The pyramids therefore represent far more than simple piles of stone stacked upward into geometric shapes. They were carefully layered constructions where materials, surfaces, and protective outer sections all worked together to create durability and stability over immense stretches of time. Through detailed finishing work, practical material selection, and layered structural design, ancient Egyptian builders created monuments capable of surviving long after the original workers, tools, and surrounding civilizations had disappeared into history. The construction of a pyramid did not happen quickly. These large structures required many years of continuous labor, planning, and coordination before reaching completion. Modern people sometimes underestimate the scale of time involved because the finished pyramids appear so permanent and motionless against the desert landscape. Yet behind that still appearance existed long periods of daily physical work repeated across seasons and years. Stone had to be quarried, shaped, transported, positioned and refined through organized effort, carried out steadily over long stretches of time. Large construction projects always depend heavily on time because even efficient systems can only move so much material within a single day. Modern skyscrapers, bridges, and tunnels often require years of coordinated labor despite advanced machinery and powerful equipment. Ancient pyramid builders worked with far simpler technology while handling vast quantities of heavy stone. Progress therefore unfolded gradually through repeated activity rather than sudden dramatic bursts of construction. The pyramids rose slowly above the landscape layer by layer through accumulated effort over many years. Work followed organized patterns that helped maintain consistency throughout the project. Labor crews likely repeated familiar routines connected to quarrying, transport, placement, and surface preparation. Organized patterns reduce confusion because workers know where to go, what tasks to perform, and how their responsibilities connect to the larger construction process. Pyramid building therefore depended not only on physical strength, but also on systems capable of maintaining order over long periods of time. Modern industries still rely heavily on organized routines for similar reasons. Airports, hospitals, and shipping ports operate continuously through carefully coordinated schedules and repeated procedures. Without organized systems, large groups of people quickly interfere with one another's work, and efficiency begins to collapse. Ancient Egyptian pyramid construction faced the same challenge on a massive scale. Thousands of workers needed coordinated activity so that stone, tools, and labor continued moving smoothly throughout the project. Labor was likely divided into specialized roles that allowed workers to focus on specific responsibilities. Some crews concentrated primarily on quarrying stone, while others handled transport, shaping, or placement. Toolmakers repaired equipment, while additional workers managed food supplies, water distribution, and construction support. Dividing labor in this way improved efficiency because repeated experience helped workers become increasingly skilled within their assigned tasks. This principle remains extremely common in the modern world. A large restaurant functions more efficiently when cooks, servers, and supply staff each focus on specialized responsibilities rather than attempting every task at once. Hospitals rely on surgeons, nurses, technicians, and support staff performing different roles that work together toward patient care. Pyramid construction followed a similar organizational pattern where specialized groups contributed separate forms of labor supporting the larger project. Coordination between these groups became essential because pyramid construction involved many connected stages happening at the same time. Quarry workers removing stone influenced transport crews waiting for material movement. Placement teams depended on properly shaped blocks arriving in the correct sequence near the growing structure. Delays or confusion in one area could affect progress elsewhere throughout the project. Organization therefore acted almost like a framework, connecting thousands of separate actions into one larger coordinated system. The long duration of construction also required stability within Egyptian society itself. Reliable agriculture along the Nile River helped provide food supplies capable of supporting large labor forces over many years. Worker settlements near pyramid sites suggest systems existed for housing, feeding, and organizing substantial populations connected to construction activity. Pyramid building therefore reflected not only engineering skill, but also the administrative ability to maintain long-term labor systems across extended periods. Seasonal patterns may have influenced labor organization as well. Some historians believe workers participated more heavily during periods when Nile flooding limited agricultural activity in surrounding farmland. During these times, labor could shift towards state construction projects while farming temporarily slowed. If correct, this would mean pyramid construction became closely connected to the natural agricultural rhythms of Egyptian society itself. The movement of water, food production, and organized labor all contributed indirectly to the rising stone structures. Maintaining motivation and coordination across such long projects likely required strong leadership and reliable routines. Workers needed schedules, supplies, and clear direction, while supervisors managed labor distribution and construction sequencing. Large projects become difficult to sustain when organization weakens or goals become unclear. The pyramids therefore depended on systems capable of preserving steady progress year after year without losing overall structure and coordination. A useful comparison can be found in the construction of modern cathedrals or large public monuments that sometimes continue across decades. Many workers contribute only small sections during their own years of labor, while the complete structure emerges gradually across much longer stretches of time. Pyramid construction likely felt similar for many workers involved. Individuals may have spent years performing repeated tasks without ever seeing the final structure fully completed during the early stages of construction. There is something remarkable about the patience hidden within these long building periods. Modern society often expects rapid, visible results, supported by machines and automation. The pyramids followed a far slower rhythm, shaped by steady human labor and organized repetition across many years. Workers returned day after day beneath the Egyptian sun to continue tasks that advanced the structure only gradually over time. Yet those repeated efforts accumulated into monuments capable of surviving for thousands of years afterward. The pyramids, therefore, stand not only as achievements of stone engineering, but also as examples of long-term human coordination on an enormous scale. Organized work patterns, divided labor roles, and careful planning allowed construction to continue steadily across many years without collapsing into disorder. Through patience, repetition, and sustained coordination, millions of individual actions slowly combined into structures that still dominate the Egyptian landscape thousands of years after the original workers completed their final layers of stone. As pyramid construction continued across many years, repetition gradually transformed difficult labor into increasingly efficient systems. Workers performing the same tasks day after day developed smoother routines, better coordination, and more reliable methods for handling stone, transport, and placement. The pyramids were not built through random, isolated moments of effort. They emerged through continuous, repeated activity, organized carefully over long stretches of time. Efficiency developed slowly as experience accumulated across generations of laborers, supervisors, and skilled workers connected to the construction process. Repetition improves human performance in almost every area of life. A person learning to play an instrument often struggles at first with awkward movements and uncertain timing. After enough repetition, the same actions become smoother and more controlled. Athletes improve coordination through repeated training, while craftspeople develop precision through years of practice. Pyramid workers likely experience similar improvement through constant exposure to quarrying, shaping, transport, and placement. Tasks that may have once seemed difficult gradually became more familiar through repeated experience. Efficiency did not necessarily mean speed in the modern sense. Ancient Egyptian builders were not racing to complete the pyramids as quickly as possible through rapid industrial production. Instead, efficiency meant maintaining reliable progress while reducing wasted effort, confusion, and unnecessary mistakes. Organized systems allowed workers to move stone more consistently, position blocks more accurately, and coordinate labor more effectively over long periods of time. The goal was stable, continuous progress rather than sudden bursts of uncontrolled activity. Continuous work patterns became especially important because pyramid construction depended on many connected stages functioning together smoothly. Quarry crews needed to supply stone regularly, while transport systems carried blocks toward the growing structure. Placement teams then prepared and positioned those stones into carefully organized layers. If one part of the system slowed significantly, the surrounding stages could also become disrupted. Maintaining continuity therefore helped preserve steady progress across the entire construction process. Modern manufacturing systems still rely heavily on continuity for similar reasons. Factories producing vehicles or machinery depend on coordinated movement between supply chains, assembly lines, and quality control systems. Interruptions in one area can quickly affect production elsewhere. Ancient pyramid construction operated through a slower and more physical rhythm, yet the same general principle remained true. Organized systems worked best when labor, materials, and timing remained connected through steady patterns. Time itself became one of the most important forces shaping the pyramids. Modern people often focus primarily on the finished structure while overlooking the enormous duration required to create it. Yet the pyramids only became possible because labor accumulated gradually over many years. A single day of work may have produced only small visible progress against such large structures. Thousands of repeated days slowly transformed quarried stone into massive geometric forms rising above the desert landscape. A useful comparison can be found in the growth of a forest. No single day creates the entire landscape. Instead, small gradual changes accumulate over long periods until trees eventually dominate the environment around them. Pyramid construction followed a similar rhythm, shaped by steady accumulation rather than sudden transformation. One layer of stone led to another until the structure slowly expanded upward, year after year. The maintenance of systems over long periods also required stability within the surrounding society. Food production, labor organization, and material transport all needed to continue functioning reliably while construction remained underway. Pyramid building therefore reflected long-term coordination between agriculture, administration, and engineering, rather than isolated physical labor alone. The structures emerged because Egyptian society could support large projects across extended stretches of time. Repetition also helped preserve consistency in the finished structure. Workers repeating familiar methods produced more predictable results than constantly changing techniques would allow. Similar shaping methods, transport routines, and placement procedures created stable patterns throughout the pyramid. This consistency improved alignment and structural balance because each stage followed organized systems refined gradually through experience. Even modern architecture often depends heavily on repetition to maintain quality and reliability. Builders use standard measurements, repeated structural patterns, and consistent construction methods because predictable systems reduce the likelihood of major errors. Ancient Egyptian builders achieved similar advantages through organized, repeated labor. Consistency allowed millions of separate stone placements to function together as one stable structure. There is something almost quiet about the way time shaped the pyramids. Modern construction sites are often filled with engines, flashing lights, and rapid visible activity. Pyramid construction likely unfolded through a slower rhythm where movement remained steady but gradual beneath the heat of the Egyptian sun. Workers repeated familiar motions while stone slowly accumulated layer by layer across the growing structure. The pace may have felt ordinary during any single day, yet over years the results became extraordinary. The final pyramids therefore represent accumulated human effort preserved in stone. Every block reflects countless repeated actions carried out carefully over long periods of time. Workers cut stone, prepared surfaces, transported materials, and adjusted placement again and again until efficient systems developed through repetition and experience. Time itself became part of the construction process because the structures could only emerge through patient, sustained labor, continuing steadily across many years. The pyramids continue standing today, partly because they were built through this gradual, organized rhythm rather than rushed, uncontrolled effort. Repetition improved efficiency, while continuous systems maintained stability throughout construction. The builders understood that enormous achievements often emerge not from sudden dramatic moments, but from small, reliable actions repeated consistently over time. Through patience, coordination, and accumulated effort, ancient Egyptian workers slowly transformed millions of individual stones into monuments capable of surviving across thousands of years of human history. By the later stages of pyramid construction, it becomes easier to see that the pyramids were never created through a single idea or one isolated form of labor. They emerged through many connected systems working together at the same time. Material properties, physical forces, and organized human effort all influenced one another continuously throughout the building process. Stone needed to behave predictably under pressure. Workers needed methods capable of overcoming weight and friction. Construction crews required coordination and planning to maintain stable progress over many years. The pyramids existed because all of these systems functioned together rather than separately. The behavior of limestone shaped nearly every construction decision from the beginning onward. The stone needed enough strength to support tremendous weight while remaining workable enough for shaping and alignment. If the material cracked too easily, the structure would become unstable over time. If the stone proved too difficult to shape, transport and placement would become far less efficient. Builders therefore relied on practical understanding of how limestone responded to cutting, pressure, and long-term compression beneath enormous weight. Material properties still guide modern engineering in very similar ways today. Steel behaves differently from concrete, while wood responds differently from stone. Engineers choose materials according to how they react under force, weather, and repeated stress. Ancient Egyptian builders approached construction through the same practical mindset. They worked with the natural qualities of limestone rather than attempting to force the material into impossible forms. The success of the pyramids depended heavily on understanding the strengths and limitations of the stone itself. Physics influenced every stage of construction, whether workers described those principles scientifically or not. Gravity pulled continuously downward on every block, while friction resisted movement during transport across land. Force needed to be applied carefully enough to move stone without losing stability or control. Ramps reduced lifting difficulty by spreading effort across longer distances, while the pyramid shape distributed weight safely downward into the broad foundation below. Physical laws shaped the construction process constantly from quarry to final placement. A useful comparison can be found in sailing across open water. Sailors long understood wind, balance, and movement through direct experience even before formal scientific explanations existed. A poorly balanced boat responds differently from a stable one, while changing wind direction affects movement continuously. Pyramid builders developed similar practical knowledge through repeated labor involving weight, friction, balance, and motion. They learned how physical forces behaved because successful construction depended on understanding those behaviors correctly. Human effort connected all of these physical systems together. Stone does not move by itself across desert ground, and ramps do not function without labor crews pulling heavy blocks upward along prepared surfaces. Workers transformed practical understanding into physical action through coordinated movement repeated over many years. Every stage of pyramid construction depended on human bodies applying force carefully and consistently under demanding conditions. Organization allowed that labor to function efficiently on such a large scale. Quarry workers, transport crews, placement teams, and support systems all needed coordination so that materials and labor continued flowing steadily throughout construction. Large projects become unstable when communication breaks down or systems lose order. The pyramids therefore depended on administration and planning as much as physical strength. Human coordination became part of the engineering process itself. Modern construction still depends heavily on this combination of material science, physics, and organized labor. A bridge requires proper materials, understanding of force distribution, and coordinated workers capable of assembling the structure safely. Large cargo ships rely on balance, movement, and navigation systems supported by trained crews. Ancient pyramid construction followed the same broad principle, where success emerged through different systems supporting one another continuously over time. Friction provides a particularly clear example of this relationship between physics and human labor. Heavy stone resisted movement because friction pressed downward between the block and the ground beneath it. Workers responded by preparing surfaces, using sledges and applying coordinated force through ropes and teamwork. Physics created the challenge while organized labor developed practical methods for overcoming it. Neither element alone explains the transport process fully. The solution depended on understanding how both worked together. Stability within the finished pyramid also reflected this combination of forces and planning. The geometry of the structure distributed weight downward, while tightly fitted stone reduced shifting between layers. Careful placement, leveling, and organization helped maintain balance as construction continued upward. Human attention guided the process, while physical principles determined whether the structure would remain stable over long periods of time. The pyramids became successful, partly because the builders worked with those physical realities rather than ignoring them. There is something remarkable about how interconnected the entire system became. The quarry influenced transport because stone quality affected movement and shaping. Transport influenced placement because damaged or uneven blocks created alignment problems later. Geometry influenced stability, while labor organization influenced efficiency. Every stage connected to the next through continuous physical and human relationships. The pyramid behaved less like separate construction steps and more like one enormous coordinated process unfolding gradually over many years. Modern people sometimes search for a single hidden secret explaining how the pyramids were built. Yet the true answer appears far more grounded and practical. The pyramids emerged because ancient Egyptian builders combined suitable materials, organized labor, and careful understanding of physical behavior into systems capable of functioning reliably over long periods of time. There was no need for impossible technology or mysterious forces beyond ordinary human experience. Stone, gravity, friction, coordination, and patient labor proved powerful enough when organized effectively together. The pyramids therefore stand as lasting examples of how human beings can work with the natural world through observation, planning, and repeated effort. Material properties influenced construction, while physical forces shaped movement and stability. Organized workers transformed those ideas into reality through steady, coordinated labor carried out beneath the Egyptian sun across many years. The finished structures continue rising above the desert today because all of these systems supported one another successfully as part of one immense connected process preserved in stone. By the final stages of pyramid construction, millions of individual actions had already been repeated across many years of labor. Stone had been removed from quarries, shaped into usable forms, transported across prepared ground, and positioned carefully into rising layers beneath the Egyptian sun. What began as rough limestone buried within the earth gradually became one of the most recognizable structures in human history. The pyramids emerged slowly through connected systems of material, physics, and organized human effort working together over long periods of time. The process always began with natural resources. Limestone formed over immense geological stretches of time beneath ancient seas, long before pyramid construction ever started. Tiny marine sediments slowly compressed into solid rock, while changing landscapes eventually exposed large stone deposits near the Nile River Valley. Ancient Egyptian builders inherited these natural materials from processes already unfolding across millions of years of Earth's history. The pyramids therefore began not with human labor alone, but with geology itself quietly shaping the stone deep beneath the ground. Workers then transformed that stone through quarrying and preparation. Large blocks were separated from rock formations using simple tools, repeated strikes, and patient physical effort. Rough surfaces became more controlled through shaping and leveling, while transport crews prepared routes capable of handling enormous weight. Every stage required organization because one process depended closely on the next. Poorly shaped stone complicated placement, while difficult transport slowed construction across the entire project. The builders therefore treated pyramid construction as a connected system where preparation influenced everything that followed afterward. Physics shaped the process continuously. Gravity pulled downward on every stone block while friction resisted movement during transport. Ramps reduced lifting difficulty by spreading force across longer distances, while the pyramid's geometric form distributed weight safely downward through broad, stable foundations. Ancient Egyptian workers may not have written mathematical formulas describing these behaviors, yet they understood them through direct, repeated experience. Their methods reflected practical knowledge developed gradually through observation, repetition, and careful labor over many generations. The pyramids also demonstrate how human organization can transform difficult tasks into manageable systems when labor becomes coordinated effectively over time. Quarry workers, transport crews, placement teams, and support systems all contributed separate forms of effort connected to the larger construction process. Food supplies, tools, schedules, and movement patterns needed constant coordination so that progress continued steadily, year after year. The finished structures therefore represent not only engineering achievements, but also examples of long-term human cooperation on an enormous scale. Modern construction still relies on many of these same underlying principles, even though machines now perform much of the heavy labor. Buildings require suitable materials chosen according to their physical properties. Weight must travel safely through stable foundations, while workers coordinate movement, timing, and placement during construction. Roads, bridges, and towers all depend on balancing force, stability, and organization carefully. The pyramids remain fascinating, partly because they reveal how much can be achieved through these basic principles, even without modern engines or advanced machinery. The shape of the pyramid itself became one of the greatest sources of long-term stability. The broad lower base supported enormous weight, while the narrowing upper structure reduced stress higher in the building. Stone blocks fitted tightly together distributed pressure downward through the layers beneath them, while smoother outer casing stones protected the inner structure from gradual environmental damage. Geometry, material strength, and careful placement all work together as part of one connected design shaped around gravity and balance. There is also something deeply human hidden within the immense scale of the pyramids. Modern people often experience the structures from a distance, where they appear silent, still, and almost unreal against the desert horizon. Yet every visible section was created through ordinary physical actions repeated patiently over time. Workers lifted tools, shaped stone, adjusted ropes and guided heavy blocks into position day after day beneath heat, dust and sunlight. Small movements accumulated gradually into massive visible results, preserved across thousands of years. Time itself became part of the construction process. The pyramids did not rise suddenly through dramatic moments of rapid building. They emerged slowly through continuous labor, carried out across many seasons and years. Every completed layer prepared the foundation for the next, while organized systems maintained stability and progress over long periods. The final structures, therefore, contain not only stone and geometry, but also enormous quantities of accumulated human time preserved physically within their layered forms. The pyramids continue standing today because the builders respected the natural behavior of materials and physical forces rather than attempting to ignore them. Limestone was selected because it balanced strength and workability. Ramps reduced lifting difficulty through inclined movement. Tight-fitting blocks improved stability, while broad foundations distributed weight safely into the earth below. Human labor succeeded because it worked together with gravity, friction, and geometry, instead of struggling against them blindly. There is something calming about the slow, practical logic behind the entire process. The pyramids were not built through impossible miracles or mysterious powers hidden beyond ordinary understanding. They emerged through patient observation, repeated effort, and careful organization applied steadily over time. Ancient Egyptian builders solved one problem after another, using the materials, tools, and knowledge available to them while working within the physical realities of the world around them. Even after thousands of years, the pyramids still rise above the desert landscape with remarkable stability and balance. Wind has crossed their surfaces for centuries, while civilizations have risen and disappeared around them. The smooth outer casing stones may no longer cover every side, and time has altered parts of the structures, yet the massive geometric forms remain standing because the underlying systems were designed so carefully from the beginning. Stone, gravity, organization, and human labor combined into structures capable of outlasting the world that created them. Thank you for listening to the Sleepy Mind channel. I hope you enjoyed learning about how the pyramids were built.